Hi, and welcome back to A Positive Light. I'm your host, Joni Lane, and thank you for joining us here today. And thank you, LCM TV, for having us. Um, we're here every Monday afternoon at 3 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. And I want to tell you a little bit about A Positive Light. Not only is it a show here on the internet, but it's also a nonprofit in Kelseyville. And it is a center where we hold meditation practices and healing groups and all kinds of personal growth classes. We have guest teachers and various kinds of activities there. I'm the main teacher. And every Monday night at 7 o'clock, we have our Monday night meditation for 1 hour. There's no cost, and it's a great place to come and practice your meditation. We do a variety of different kinds of meditation. So it could be a mindfulness meditation, or loving kindness meditation, or Vipassana insight meditation. And there's a number of different meditations that we do as well. So I wanted to let you know about that. Mondays at 7 every week we hold meditation. There's no cost. It's just a great place to come and practice the meditation. I'm the teacher there, and I'm the leader of the group, but I will answer your questions and I'll make suggestions to you if you're new at it and you have questions. But if you're just looking for a place to come and practice meditation away from your home, it's a great place to come. You can look us up on the internet, apositivelight.com. And as I said, we're located in Kelseyville, California, which is about 2 hours north of San Francisco. Today we're going to be talking about something that we've been talking about. We're going to continue our series on the 3 difficult practices. In Buddhism, they'll say, do your best to practice the 3 difficult practices. And they say do your best to practice them because it's difficult to do, which is why they're called the difficult practices. The first one is recognizing your behavior. The second is doing something different. And the third is to make this a lifestyle, a commitment throughout your life to make changes to better your behavior patterns. Some of the things that cause us suffering are the way we think about how something should be, the way we get attached to our desires of an outcome that we want, the way we have expectations for something and get attached to that. Sometimes it works out, but many times, in fact, most times it doesn't work out the way we're thinking. And this can cause unhappiness. And it's one of the things the Dalai Lama says that we all have in common. All human beings want to be happy. And we are pretty happy when we're little. We don't really know the trials and tribulations of the world yet. But right away we start learning how to get what we want. If I do this behavior, I will get this. It's a matter of manipulating and survival. It's natural for us to do this, and there's nothing wrong with it, unless it causes suffering and unhappiness. So the first step that we're going to concentrate on today is recognizing and acknowledging this behavior that causes the problem. And next week we'll talk more about how to make changes, how to choose different behavior, and how to apply that to your life. That's a very difficult process. And in last week's discussion, we talked more in depth about that. If you want to watch any of the series that we've already done, the shows are archived on the website. We have a tab on the website for the television show. And if you're interested in watching a show again and taking notes, or maybe you hadn't seen one and you want to catch up, they're all archived on that website. But today we're going to be focusing on the difficult practice, which is acknowledging how we become hooked on our behavior. What hooks us in to those patterns that we fall into? In Buddhism, it's called Shenpa. And what is Shenpa? Shenpa is being caught in a certain frame of mind. So it's a trigger at a subconscious level that we're not even aware of because it's so habitual. It's a pattern that we're so used to that we naturally just go to that. It's not always the best reaction or the best result. And if it's causing unhappiness, then it's considered shenpa. You're caught up in your shenpa. So part of noticing your behavior and noticing and acknowledging when you're caught up in shenpa is to notice your body. And you might feel different. Let's say, for example, someone is saying something to you, you're in a conversation with someone, and they say something that pushes one of your buttons. Okay, now instantly you have a reaction, and your chest might tighten, and your shoulders might go up, and you immediately go into a rather fight or flight, perhaps, kind of a conditioning response that you're not even aware of, but you know that that button has been pushed because you can feel it. And you can feel it in your body so strongly sometimes that you don't even know, why am I feeling this right now? Why am I feeling anger toward this person who simply just said something? They didn't attack me, they just said something, and my button has been pushed. Now, usually that triggers a behavior that you have developed over the years, and it is your behavior pattern. And normally that behavior is one that will defend or push back. And in doing that, becoming defensive and pushing back, the person who you may be talking to now becomes defensive because they notice that you have changed. They notice that your tone of voice has changed. Maybe your posture has changed. So now they're on the defensive. And they're thinking, uh-oh, I'm in some kind of strange water here and I don't know what's going on. I think we've all felt this with other people. I think we've all been talking to someone and noticed that suddenly they stand back. They seem very closed off and they tense up and you think, uh-oh, I said something this person didn't like, and you're either going to backtrack or you're going to defend yourself or you're going to change the subject. There's all habitual patterns that we fall into. These patterns are not bad. They just exist. When they're causing you unhappiness, because now you're mad because somebody said something that pushed your button, you're going to be unhappy. Anger doesn't feel good. Notice how anger feels in your body. It doesn't feel good. So it's causing unhappiness. So practicing acknowledging that behavior, practicing noticing it, identifying it, standing back and observing it, and don't judge yourself, just notice it. And I think if you start your day with the idea of, today I'm going to really make an effort on just noticing my behavior, you'll be surprised at how often that happens. And for some people it happens quite often. And I really struggled with it myself for years. I was very defensive, angry. I know it's hard to believe because I seem so sweet and innocent now. But I was a very angry person who was very defensive. It was difficult to talk to me because I tended to fly off into directions that were just anger. So people stopped talking to me, and because I was irrational in my behavior. But when I started practicing noticing the shenpa, when I got caught up in it, I stepped back from it and started realizing, oh, that behavior doesn't make sense. They didn't do anything wrong. Why would I want to get upset with them? So I started questioning my behavior. I started questioning my buttons. And I think that's a really huge first step in maybe identifying behavior and getting ready to make a change with it. Not quite ready to know what to do with it yet, but taking that first step to notice it and identify it. That's a really big deal. part of noticing the behavior also is that you'll notice that you feel almost out of control. It's like a tug that pulls you in. It's like when that button is pushed that reminds you of whatever, and it's not a happy feeling, and you fall into that behavior. It's almost like something's pulling you in. Like you're getting pulled into the undertow of your emotions, and you're getting carried away by them, and you're getting caught. That's what's known as being hooked or caught in Shenpa. When you start noticing that, it's a good time to step back and just kind of observe it. So let's say you're talking to someone and suddenly you realize you're feeling really defensive about something, and you notice these feelings that start arising in you. The best thing to do at this point is to just kind of pause and take a breath and notice it and think, okay, I'm not going to react right now. I'm going to understand that this happened. I noticed it. I'm not comfortable with these feelings because for some reason I'm very upset right now. But I'm not going to react on them. I'm just going to look at them. In doing that, you've taken the step to acknowledging your behavior and noticing it. And once you start doing that and start pausing instead of reacting, you're beginning to create a new behavior. Now, you're not creating a behavior you can act on yet or replace an uncomfortable behavior with something else. But a huge first step is even at wanting to acknowledge it, because some people have an attitude of, well, this is the way I am, and they can take me for who I am or not take me at all. And I think, well, that's fine. I don't need to take you. You're obviously a difficult person, and I'd really prefer to hang out with nice people that aren't hanging on to their anger. But if you don't want to be like that, it's really up to you. And some people are fine with it. You know, they can go through their whole life like that. I don't have any judgment around it. I just choose not to be around them. And I noticed at one point in my life, a lot of people didn't want to be around me because of my behavior. And I thought, why don't I have a whole lot of friends? And then I had to take responsibility for it because I was acting the way I was acting. And who'd want to be around that? The energy isn't anything you want to be around. So I really took charge of it. And I identified it. And I still have a struggle with some of it, but not as badly as I did before. And I've learned that I don't need to react. Sometimes I can just say, wow, I'm feeling really upset right now by what you said, and I really don't know why, because it's not your problem, but I thought I better tell you that because I know my body language just changed. So I'm taking responsibility for my behavior, and I'm taking responsibility for my actions and reactions. And I'm letting them know it's not their responsibility when I say that. But I am noticing it, and I am acknowledging it. And that's a very big step. And it's one that you can take every day, just even once or twice a day. The more often you notice it and pause and not react, the more easily you can fall into creating new behavior. So I'm going to try to stick to my notes because I do tend to go off into directions that I really want to talk about, but there's certain things I need to talk about. One of the things I want to talk about is noticing when Shenpa arises, noticing when you're getting hooked and getting caught in that feeling. How does that feel physically? It might help you to put a name to it. Are you feeling anger? Are you feeling anxious? Do you feel uneasy or uncomfortable for some reason? Is there a tightness in your chest? Do your shoulders go up? Do you physically step back? Those are all things to notice. That's your body giving you very clear messages that something uncomfortable is going on. And when you're caught in that, and you're taking a breath and you're pausing rather than reacting. You're noticing, okay, this Shenpa is in my body, it is in my psyche, it is something deep inside. And the more you notice it, like I said, the easier it'll be to notice it. If you react, then you're just deepening that reaction. And the more often you do that, the more you will do that. It creates its own existence, and that cyclical thinking is not going to keep you happy. Sometimes in a conversation, you'll be just talking about whatever, and suddenly somebody says something that for some reason upsets you. So maybe you're talking about the weather, and somebody makes some off-color joke, and it really offends you. Do you have a knee-jerk reaction? Many people do. I know I do. When you feel the knee-jerk reaction come up, rather than saying something, stop and breathe and just notice it. I think the practice of just noticing it is very difficult. I think the practice of not reacting to something that you really want to react to is very difficult. And that difficulty is telling you something. The more difficult it is, the more you probably need to work on it. That's a big message. So, Western culture, we have been raised in a culture where sometimes our parents or somebody that we look up to makes us feel bad about who we are or how we're acting. And other cultures don't have this so much as we do. So sometimes when you're noticing and identifying, I'm caught up in the Shenpa, I'm caught up in the reaction and the feeling, and my button has been pushed and my triggers are triggering, sometimes we'll say, well, I'm really a bad person. Here I go again. I'm doing the same thing I always do. And it's really not what's needed. That kind of behavior is only going to be self-defeating. And I want you to notice that as well. When you catch yourself saying, oh man, I'm doing it again. What a dope. I'm such a dope. I hear myself tell myself that, and I have to stop. And pause and think, you know what? That's another thing I need to work on. Just because we make a mistake or have a habit doesn't mean we're a bad person. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that we have a habit that is causing us unhappiness. And we need to notice it, identify it, take a breath, and step back from it for a minute and just kind of look at it. That's all you need to do. No need to beat yourself up about it. Just notice that you're human and you do have reactions. Also notice that the mere arising of the Shenpa in yourself is not the problem. We all have reactions. It's human. And it's not always problematic. What happens that causes a problem is when there's an urgency to react in a negative way. When you're so caught up in the urge to say something, to fire back at someone, to say something defensive, to react to your buttons being pushed. Those are the things that we need to look at. A lot of times when we look at that and when we stop and we don't react the way we want to, it causes us to be really uncomfortable because it's not our normal behavior. And whenever we're not acting in our normal behavior, we feel almost like we're not being us. And so it takes a little getting used to. So don't feel like you need to judge yourself or beat yourself up or think, oh, I can't do this, because it's uncomfortable and you don't know how. You're being human. And anything uncomfortable, anything foreign is going to be uncomfortable at first. And anything uncomfortable is something we're going to try to avoid. And when we try to avoid something new or uncomfortable, we tend to go back to our old behavior. And just because it's uncomfortable doesn't mean it's not okay. Our old behavior doesn't serve us anymore because it's causing unhappiness. So sometimes learning to just sit in the discomfort and look at it is very healthy. So keep that in mind because that's a big deal. That's a big deal for us. Discomfort. This culture is so used to just instant gratification. I want to feel good now. I don't want to have to work that hard to feel good. Money should buy me happiness. These are things that we know aren't true, but yet we want them. And just the idea that we want them actually causes unhappiness. Because for the most part, we're not going to get those things. There's some things I suppose money does help with, but learning how to be happy in your own head isn't going to have anything to do with money. So, if you're caught up in your behavior and your shenpa arises and you feel like you really want to bark at someone, you really want to get defensive, remind yourself that if you go down that road again, you're just making that path deeper. You are throwing kerosene on the fire or the spark of shenpa. You are making it worse. And when you're starting a fire in the first place because you're defensive, you don't want to throw kerosene on it. That initial tug that we feel when we have our buttons pushed is very difficult to resist. It's so irresistible sometimes that it's just easier to just go down the regular old path you go to and just tell this person off or whatever it is that you normally do. It's just easier because you're used to it. You're comfortable there. It's your go-to place. You don't have to think about it. You just do it. And we tend to want to do what's easier. Humans just do that. The path of least resistance. But when the path of least resistance is causing you unhappiness, maybe it's time to create a new path. It's a suggestion, and I'm not telling you what to do. And the one thing I want you to realize is that you don't need to change who you are, because you're perfect the way you are. Your reactions are learned reactions, and they may not be causing you happiness. So don't try to create a new person, but try to take the person you know you are in your heart and your higher thoughts and develop your intellect. Really put an effort into looking at your higher mind. You know what's going to cause problems to get worse. You know intellectually how you should act and the things you want to be like. It takes effort. You actually need to pause and look at the situation, look at your reactions, notice how they feel in your body, and ask yourself if you want to react this way. When you do this, it's a really good opportunity to take a minute and just think, okay, I'm going to use my intelligence now. Logically, how do I want to approach this situation? Do I want to let my emotions run me? Or do I want to allow my higher mind to take over? And even though it might take a bit of effort at first, it becomes a new habit that's easier and easier to do. And before you know it, they're so easy because it's what you've been practicing that you really don't have to put a lot of effort into it anymore. So like anything new, when you're learning it, it's going to take some discipline and some effort. But practicing it is going to help you. Practicing and making a conscious effort to make different decisions and noticing your behavior every day is going to make everything easier for you in the long run. So, taking a breath when you're feeling these feelings, noticing that you're hooked, stepping back. Sometimes you don't need to react at all. Sometimes you just need to think about it. It's not always I want to say this correctly. Instead of feeding your thoughts and feeding the behaviors that you're not happy with, you can bring yourself to a new place of looking at the reactions you could have or non-reactions you could have. And when you practice them, you actually bring yourself to a new place of freedom. And when I say this, I'm talking about the freedom from the suffering that your old behaviors and your old patterns are causing. You bring yourself to a new doorway where you have a choice to step through into freedom. Freedom from the things that you've been doing that have been causing yourself unhappiness. Now, you can't control other people. And other people are going to do and say things we don't like. It's just the way it is. And we all know in an intellectual way that we have choices and we can change the way we act and react and feel. But it's not easy. So I want to stress that when you do decide to actually put this into action, you actually bring yourself to a new doorway where you can step into some real freedom. And when I say freedom again, I'm talking about the lack of stress, the lack of anxiety, the lack of unhappiness that we create. I know when people say, oh, I want to just be happy, it's really easy to say. But a better way to say it is, how can I find a life that is free of anxiety and free of stress and free of unhappiness? And this is the easiest way to do it. Just pausing in your behavior and noticing it. Just identifying it, giving it a name, feeling it in your body, taking a breath, stepping back. A lot of times when you're feeling uncomfortable because you want to practice a new behavior because you've given it some thought and you're uncomfortable, you feel like you're wearing somebody else's clothes. It's like you're trying on new things. I would suggest one of the best things to do is to lean into that feeling and really lean into it and ask yourself, is it uncomfortable because I'm pretending to be someone else? Or is it uncomfortable just because it's new? And also look at the results of the new behavior. Did it get you what you wanted? Did it help the situation? Do you feel better about who you are and the things you've said? Is there a lightness to your feeling now instead of a heavy weight? I notice that when we react to things in our automatic way, we cause stress and anxiety, there's like a weight that comes down on us, and we carry that with us. But when we react in a way that we feel in our heart, in a loving way, there's a lightness that comes to it. You feel like a weight is lifted, and you're actually standing a bit taller and smiling easier. So, I think Pema Chodron described it really well when she was talking about it as an itch. And I get poison oak really easily, so I know a good itch. And when you have poison ivy or poison oak and you start scratching it, it feels really good. It just is the best feeling because you itch so bad and it feels so good to scratch it. But it's just making the situation worse. It's the same thing with Shenpa. When you feel yourself being tugged and pulled in a direction that you automatically go in, but causes you stress and anxiety, don't give in to that itch. Don't give in to it. Don't make it worse. It will go away if you leave it alone. A new thing will develop when you practice new behavior. And the beginning to practice new behavior is to notice it and observe it, identify it, step back from it, and just kind of try to figure out where it came from. What's that all about? What are my options? So we're going to take a break right now for a couple of minutes. And after the break, I'm going to have a guest on. And he's going to be throwing questions at me and comments to me. And we'll see how that goes. So stay with us, listen to the commercial, and I'll see you in a couple minutes.
You are invited to participate in a true multimedia experience coming to a home near you. LCM TV is bringing Lake County into the new millennium with news, live broadcast, information, music, talk shows, and local programming, all streaming in high definition online and soon to be on your Roku box. Join us at lcm-tv.com or be a part of our studio audience. You can also watch the shows at lakecomagazine.com as we provide programming to inform, enlighten, and maybe even enrage you. On Lake County Magazine Talk Show with Terry and Pete the Tax Guy, Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. Like racing? Try the Checkered Flag Show, hosted by Ace Naylor on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. All ages and divisions in regional and national fields. Joni Lane brings a positive light to you every Monday at 3 p.m. Pasha Space brings an international flair as they discuss ecological, health, and social issues in Haiti with people around the world. End up your week with positive, conscious sounds on Saturday at 9 a.m. with Sister T on the Bridge. This show is also simulcast on KMEC 105.1 FM in Ukiah. Our latest show, LCM TV News, is brought to you live Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at noon, and rebroadcast at 6:30 p.m. and noon daily, Tuesday, Saturday, and Sunday, featuring national, regional, and local news, weather, and sports. We have it all here for you on your local TV station, LCM TV. Join us online and soon on Roku, giving you access to all the best Lake County has to offer. We are lcmtv.com, your multimedia connection. Tune in for the fun. It's live TV at its best.
Hi, and welcome back to A Positive Light. I am your host, Joni Lane, and we were talking about the 3 difficult practices in Buddhism, which is noticing our behavior, choosing to make a fresh start and replace it with a different behavior, and then the third, of course, is living that as a lifestyle, which is practicing it every day. I have, as a guest today, I have Pat Gleason, who is a meditator who's been meditating for a couple of years now, and he had some questions on this topic and some comments. So, Pat, welcome.
Hi, Joni. How you doing?
I'm good.
Thank you for having me today.
You're welcome.
Listening to the first half of your show and actually listening to your series as it goes along, I have some difficulties with the practices and could probably use some tools to help me get my conscious mind to override my subconscious mind.
Okay.
And, reaction is something that I think is like you were saying earlier, it's habitual. And what's the best way to get your mind to react in a different way when you spend your whole life reacting in certain ways?
It's not easy. And that's part of the second difficult practice is...
Happy birthday. Okay.
Part of the second difficult practice. The first difficult practice that we're talking about is to look at your typical behavior. Say you're in a situation, somebody does something that irks you. And, it might not upset me, it might not upset the other guy in the room, but for some reason it really bothers you. Looking at that and noticing it in your body. Now, do you know what I'm talking about when I say that? Do you know that tightness that I'm talking about?
Yeah, I think I understand it. It's difficult to, in the moment, to just grab something and say, okay, I'm through with this feeling, and you can't just end it that fast.
Right. So, do you notice in your body any tightness? Do you notice maybe your shoulders go up?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what would happen then if you were to take a deep breath and just kind of let that go and say, okay, I'm noticing that I'm feeling really tense right now. I'm noticing that my shoulders are feeling really tense and I really want to react. But what would happen at that point if you took a breath and you just kind of said, you know what, I can't give into this reaction right now, but I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to just breathe for a minute and see if I can let go of some of this.
I try that at times,
Okay.
and it does work. But that conscious awareness of it, a lot of times your subconscious is, you're doing something subconsciously, and then you take a step back and you realize it, but by then you've already done your reaction. You've already reacted.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I have the difficulty with, is how do you get your conscious mind to focus on what your reaction is going to be, not what it
Yeah.
already is.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought it up, because we have knee-jerk reactions, and we immediately react the way we always do without even know we don't even know we're doing it. It's just, it happened and you're like, oh, well, there I go again. How did that happen? How did that slip out? I'm trying not to do that. It's not easy. Noticing it is the first step. And like you said, you do notice it.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time you've noticed it, it's already happened. So make a note. And don't beat yourself up and say, oh, I did it again. Bad me. This is where you would say, okay, I did it again. And I want to make a note of, next time when I feel this tightness coming up, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to intentionally close my mouth and not say anything, because I want to look at this. I want to look at what's going on with this. I want to come back to it in meditation and notice it. And when I say meditation, I think meditation is a really big key to this, where you can sit quietly and without judgment, without beating yourself up, look at this particular behavior that you had on this day where you reacted and then said, oh, I wasn't going to do that, but I did. Taking a deep breath and meditating on it and think, where does this come from? Why did I do that? Not so much as beating yourself up about it, but really looking at the answers to why does that bother me so much? Why does something that is out of my control bother me so much? Why do I do that? Can I let it go next time? Can I notice it happening in my body and just not say anything? And then come back to meditation and look at it. I think practicing those things will help you identify them when they're coming up, and then open up some doors of some alternative behavior. Is that something you think you can do?
I think I understand what you're saying, because the practice of meditation is to be conscious of the now. And to be conscious of something now, it's in the moment, and it's your conscious mind. But even in meditation, I find myself moving to that subconscious condition, and that's where you've showed me before about, okay, recognize the thought and let it go, recognize the thought and let it go. But doing that on a daily practice, it works. I know I've practiced a few times, but it's so hard to just sit there and every time something brings that fear or that negative energy into you, it's really hard to push it away with your conscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
So tools that we can use. Because when you're driving down the road, and I find that I'm getting better at it, when you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off and you automatically go to, oh, you know, that oh is right there. I mean, it's, yeah, you're not yelling at him in his face or anything else, but you're thinking about, oh, that guy, and they cut me off, and it isn't always a guy. It's women do it, men do it. I've done it, you know. But how do you control that reaction that you have without? Because it's a horrible feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it always is. It's a fear reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But we.
Yeah. How do you
how
change
do you control
it?
that?
Yeah.
How do you?
Yeah.
harness that energy and put it in a positive direction.
Mm-hmm. And that's such a habitual reaction for you. It sounds like, I mean, when you were doing that, you tensed up, and you
Yeah.
showed me exactly what happens in your body. So, it's an immediate reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And you know it's there, you know what it feels like. And I've seen you do it, where you've said, take a breath, I'm not going to react this time. And it's difficult because you're still holding on to that physical anger that comes along with it. But you did the right first step. You noticed it, you acknowledged it, you consciously chose not to react to it. When we're in meditation, there's so many different kinds of meditation. Part of meditation is to calm your mind, let go of your thoughts, identify your thoughts, let them go. Don't beat yourself up for having thoughts because you're human. But there's times when you can, in meditation, observe. Bring up the subject. Bring up a topic. It's a type of insight meditation. And when you bring up a topic and you look at the situation, okay, now I'm going to be meditating calmly, quietly. Now I'm going to remind myself of that time in the car when that guy cut me off. Notice how your body feels. Notice how the adrenaline might start pumping. Notice how that happens, and then breathe and let it go. And in practicing that, just I've identified it, I'm letting it go, is creating a new habit. It's a practice. And when something is a really big deal for us, it's harder to let go of. So the little things that bug us can be a lot easier to let go of. They don't have such a deep-rooted reaction in us. But some things just really make us mad. And it's so hard to stop that reaction. In a way, how does it feel when you do react? In a way, does it feel good? Is there a feeling of release? I got you, I'm going to teach you a lesson? Or what kind of feeling goes on when you do react?
It doesn't, because I know what my mind is saying. Oh, I got to get this. But I never react. I don't go out and run this person off the road or do anything really harmful or hazardous. So a lot of times it'll stick with you, and this guy will be long gone, and you're still thinking about it.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that guy really.
Yeah.
And it doesn't ruin your whole day, but it ruins a good 10, 15 minutes of it.
Yeah, and sometimes it can ruin your entire day, because what we also tend to do is we create a story around it. And then 10, 15 minutes later, we're still going, that guy. We're making up a story about this person. We don't even know them. But we're creating an entire story about them. And sometimes days later, we're still playing something over in our mind. It's funny how we do that. And here we are. I used to do this when I worked in mortgage banking. Hard to believe I did that stressful job, but I did. And I would go home, and on the way home, we'd be driving, and I'd be cussing my boss out, and I'd be swearing about people. I don't know, how do they think they are? I've been gone for work for half an hour, and I get home, I'm still swearing at these people, and I think back on it now, and I think I created a whole hour of hell because I kept going over and over and over and over something that was over with and gone. And so this guy cutting you off in traffic, he has no idea he did it, probably. He's already gone on to his doctor's appointment or wherever he's going, perfectly happy at ease and bliss. And now here you're still driving down the road really mad at him. You're just like, I'm so pissed off at this guy. I have no idea who he is, but man, he made me mad, and I'm going to go on and create this story about it, and now I'm going to really torture myself with it.
Mm-hmm.
But noticing that we do that is the first step. Noticing it. So when you notice it, you're like, okay, I'm doing it again. I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to let this guy bother me. I don't know him. Maybe he got a phone call and it's an emergency and he's on his way to the hospital. This family member sick. We don't know what's going on with them. Sometimes, if we're going to create a story, let's create a story that excuses their behavior so we can get on with our lives and not have been consumed with whatever it is, because it's nothing.
It is. I've found through my meditation practices that I'm way better than I used to be. But there are triggers that, somebody miswords something or says something that you find to be kind of offsetting. And, there were times when, and I know you've seen where I get this presence about me that says, you just stepped over a line. That I've learned very well how to let things go. And it's much easier on me now. I don't stress out as much, but there are triggers that still...
Mm-hmm. And how did you get there? How did you get better than you were?
Acknowledging that there was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
So by acknowledging that I have this tendency, given certain situations, to be conscious of it and to talk to myself before I react. And tell my subconscious that, whoa, this isn't everything you made it up to be. It's probably something very innocent, and you don't need to put on the mean, no, I'm going to get you attitude.
Yes.
And it helps.
Well, what happens when you give into that attitude? What have you noticed about the feelings when you give into that attitude, that immediate knee-jerk reaction?
I allow anger in.
And what happens
And
with
then
that?
I get uptight and
Cause unhappiness.
caused unhappiness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not happy with, yeah, right. I'm not happy with the situation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
meditation did help you with that. It helped identify what was going on. It helped you step back from it and consciously decide and choose that you're not going to react to it.
Correct.
And that's a really big part of why meditation is so powerful and can change your behavior and cause happiness for you. I want to point out, too, that Shenpa isn't always about unpleasant things. Sometimes you can go to meditation class and have an expectation. Oh, I'm going to go to meditation class. I'm going to feel so blissful and wonderful. I really need this. And you get there and you're like, I'm not feeling blissful. And my thoughts are racing. And the guy sitting on the cushion next to me is doing a better job of it than I am. And that's a story you're creating in your head that is causing you pain and suffering. And it's not an unpleasant thing to go meditate, but you're causing your own Shenpa. You're causing unpleasant feelings.
Correct.
So having expectations.
And I found that was a big problem for me when I first looked at, well, I should start meditating and calm myself and feel better and do this. And I spent the longest time just trying to meditate because I had expectations and I searched for something. And then my teacher told me, well, quit searching. My teacher being Joni. Quit searching. And that really rang a bell because it was important to know that meditation isn't something that you buy or you attain or you just get it by sitting on a pillow. You open your mind and your heart and you become one with the moment, and that's all you can expect.
Mm-hmm.
There are no expectations. I learned that too.
Yeah. And I think going to a meditation class is a wonderful thing because we're learning how to sit quietly in our emotions, sit quietly in our thoughts, identify them, allow them because we're human, and don't have judgment around it. Just say, yep, I'm thinking again, and then breathe and go back to your breath and allow yourself to have a little vacation. But sometimes in the moments of those thoughts, we can have revelations as we open up our mind to not thinking. Sometimes we can realize something and have a thought that says, I just realized that I do this one thing I wasn't aware of that I was doing, but in meditation it just came to me. So sometimes meditation can be an opening. And every moment that we sit on the cushion, it creates a new habit and it creates an opening. And when you create an opening, sometimes healthy thoughts sneak in and teach us lessons. And, and those are always good to have. I think a lot of times when we go to meditation, I know I've had teachers that will really downplay anything that we thought of as a special moment in meditation. Oh, I was meditating and I saw these colors and I felt so blissful. And this teacher would say, that's nice, and move on to the next person, because those moments, when they happen, are so rare that it's because we strive for them, we block ourselves from receiving them. And the more you look for something, the more elusive it becomes. So when you have the quiet moments and you have more and more open moments where you're really not in thought and you're not caught up in your thought, you're allowing other thoughts to come in that can be healthy. And part of insight meditation, a type of insight meditation, is to look at things from a distance, observe them, and see what else there is to it. Instead of getting emotionally caught up in it and involving yourself in it, just observing and looking at a distance. It's kind of looking at somebody, like looking at someone else's personality without analyzing it, just looking. And in doing that and separating yourself from it, you can actually create an opening where things come to you that can help you solve these problems. So if you're driving in traffic and you're getting caught up in, you're stuck in a traffic jam and you really have to get somewhere and you're not going to make it because now you're in this traffic jam, nothing you can do about it, so you might as well turn the radio up and start singing. There's other alternatives.
Definitely.
Did you have any other specific questions on this topic?
Childhood reactions. And you mentioned about interaction with parents and adults as a child, and then making you not feel who you are or what you really are. And I think that's a hard one to deal with. I mean, as far as we grow up, and as we grow older, these little things are always going to be there. Mm-hmm. They're going to...
Yeah, and as a child, if you have parents or someone that you look up to in the family who makes you feel bad about who you are as a person, kids make mistakes. That's how we learn. And if they point out, hey, you did this wrong, let me show you how you can do it right, or let me show you how to fix it. If it's instructional and encouraging, then you grow into a healthy adult. If you have a parent that is constantly putting you down or making you feel bad about who you are, that you carry that through your life. And so it makes it more difficult to be objective about our reactions. It's almost like we buy into the fact that we are not deserving of being happy. So when we buy into the fact that we're not worthy, we don't work on things. We don't put the effort out. We don't want to change things because why bother? I'm not worth it anyway. As adults, if you're walking around in a state of feeling unworthy still, it's not uncommon. And don't beat yourself up about it if you are. I did it for years. But there is a point where you can talk to yourself realistically and think, you know what? That was when I was a kid, and some adult in my life had a problem. And it was their problem. I don't need to believe it. I don't need to buy into that. And even though you carry it with you, and you probably always will, you can learn to overshadow that with a positive reaction. You can learn to not buy into it. And you can learn to say, you know what? I don't want to feel like that anymore. And every time that button is pushed and I feel like a bad person, I can stop it and take a breath and not play that whole scenario in my head. I don't have to make up a story about it. I don't have to fall into the agreement of it. I can just step back from it and say, you know what? I do that to myself, and I don't want to. So I'm going to notice every time that feeling comes up, and I'm going to take a breath and step back and not get involved with that feeling. It's difficult. But like everything else, practice makes it easier. And meditation helps with that because during meditation you can say mantras. You can tell yourself how beautiful and wonderful you are because you're not being egotistical. You're being honest. We are beautiful people. And there's nothing wrong with liking who you are. As long as you're a good person, then you should like who you are. So I think that's a big part of childhood, bruising, and our ego is carrying that around. The ego, on the other hand, of someone who is an egotist, is actually more difficult because it's harder to see that you're tripping over your ego. Because you're like, well, of course I'm worth it. I'm better than you are. I can't relate to that attitude myself, but there are some people that have that, and now they wonder why they don't have friends. Why are people judging me? You know, that must be their problem. It can't be mine. It's always somebody else's problem. So you can have ego on both sides that are causing problems. It's a matter of accepting the fact that we may be in a state of unhappiness. What's causing it? Stopping from our normal reaction, taking a breath, and just observing it. You don't even have to act on it. Just observe it and identify it. Notice how it feels in your body. Notice whether you like it or not. If you don't like the way you feel, it's a really good indication that you probably shouldn't react that way.
And that brings up a good point in my mind too, because, and I've heard you say it, I've read it in Thich Nhat Hanh's books, I've heard the Dalai Lama say it, and they talk about a healthy ego as opposed to an egotist or somebody with no ego at all. And so how do you find that middle ground to a healthy ego?
That's a good question. Yeah, and part of that is when you're caught up in the story that you're telling yourself that is causing unhappiness. For example, the story about my being upset with my coworkers, driving home from work and going on and on and on in the story in my head. It's all about my ego. It's all about wanting to be right. I have the upper hand. I need to be right. They were wrong. They need to know they were wrong. It's that need that we need to be right. That's the urge I'm talking about. That's that tug that pulls you in and you get caught up in that ego and you're like, I need to be right about this and I need to make sure you know it. That's a really strong tug. And healthy ego, because we all have ego, and ego is part of what keeps us alive and healthy. Ego there's a balancing act. There's a middle ground on ego. And I think part of stopping that reaction, that cyclical thinking, taking a breath, noticing it, and stepping back from it, is releasing your ego. You're releasing yourself from that ego-driven reaction. You're going to find a healthy reaction from your intelligent mind that is not going to just benefit you, but be the intelligent choice that really doesn't involve ego. It comes from your heart. It comes from compassion and caring for both sides, yourself and others. And once you find that middle ground, and you feel good about your reaction, and you know it came from your heart in a loving way, I think that's healthy ego. It's very difficult to find. But I think the middle ground is always the answer. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but we will be back next week with our continuing series of the 3 difficult practices and how to make them not quite so difficult and apply them to our life and make ourselves happy. So thank you for joining us today. We'll be back next week at 3 o'clock. Thank you, LCM TV, for having us. Thank you, Pat, for being here, and happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm glad you were here. We'll have you on again sometime.
Me too. Well, I'd love to be here
Good,
again.
good. All right, well, thank you, and until next week, take care of yourself and be good to yourself.